So in this video, we'll be taking a look at both the animation editor and some of the lighting settings that are available within robotBuilder. Now, truth be known, these are two of the lesser known features within the product, but I think they're worth showcasing anyways because together you can do some pretty neat things with them. So let's get started. I'm going to add a light. If I click on Environment and go down to Add Light, I'm presented with three different choices of lighting options. A directional light, point, and a spotlight. Let's see what happens when I click on the directional light. Notice right away that my robot is being bathed in this white, bright light. And furthermore, if I look at my hierarchy view, we can see now that I have a directional light as an object in my model space. I'm going to click on it and hit the F key just to find it. And one thing becomes apparent is that this light seems to be far away from my robot, but it's having this big gigantic effect in terms of the area that's being affected by the light. And that's the thing about that, is that directional lights are infinitely far away, so it really doesn't matter where this light is located, how far, how close. It's going to have the same net effect on my model, which in this particular instance is to cast it in this bright white light. Now, if I click on the properties, and I'm just going to undock this here for a second so we can take a better peek. I have a couple of different options I can play with. For one, I can change the color. So when I click on that, I open up this color wheel. Some of you may prefer working with a color spectrum or RGB sliders. Myself personally, I like using the color wheel, and I'm going to change the color of this light to red and hit OK. And when I do that, the effect is immediate. My model is now lit in this bright red light. I can change the intensity of the light. Right now it's at one of the lower settings, a value of 1. If I increment this slowly, I notice that my model is now going back to being pure white light. Of course, I can bring it back down to values of 1, or even fractional values less than 1, for example, 50%. And it has the effect of dimming and graying my model space. I'm going to leave it at 1. I have options here to play with shadowing, whether I want soft or hard shadowing. I'd encourage you to explore those options on your own. Like any other object in model space, I can give my light a descriptive name. I might call this my first light. When I do that and click out, has the effect and hierarchy view of changing the name of the object. So that's a directional light for you. I think it's worthwhile to take a look at a point light because it has a very different lighting scheme. And the first thing that we can notice in a point lighting system is that now I have this sphere, and what happens in a point light is that light is emitted in all directions from the light. So depending on the effect you're trying to achieve, this may be desirable. I'm going to up the intensity and you'll see right away the difference. I almost get this Independence Day UFO-ish kind of quality, and you can see how intense this light really is. I would think that in real life it might start a fire if you had a light this bright, this close to my work surface. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit, but the options for a point light are very similar to the directional light. Again, I might want to change the color of this light, so I could go in here and change it to a yellow light. I'm going to turn this light off. I'm going to delete it. And we will take a look at a spotlight. Spotlights are probably what we're all familiar with, whether that's through bad experiences at Christmas concerts as children, or some of the frustrating nights we've spent modeling in Maya or 3ds Max. Spotlights basically work that anything in the cone of the spotlight is going to be lit. Anything outside of that cone is going to be grayed or darkened out. Now, I'm just going to open up this spotlight because I had already pre-placed it. And I'm going to go to the properties. I'm going to just turn it on. Right now I have it off. And let's just choose a color of green, for example. And right away the effect is pretty obvious and immediate. I'm going to lower the intensity to 1. And I may want to rotate this light. You can see the effect of doing that. So that's lighting in a nutshell. Not terribly difficult, but you can do some pretty neat things with lighting in robotBuilder. For my next trick, I'm going to create a very simple animation using the spotlight, and I'm going to attach it to my model, and later on we'll experiment with it further when I export this project into RobotSim. So let's take a look at the animation editor. I'm just going to click out of here. I'm going to redock my properties window. To create an animation in robotBuilder, all I do is I click the object I wish to animate, in this case the spotlight, and I right click on the light and go to add. And just like with rigid bodies, colliders, actuators, or anything else, I can pull it from this menu. So if I click on animation clip, it'll ask me for a name. I might want to call this Siren as an example. I'll decide on the length of the animation. 3 seconds sounds alright. Hit OK. When I click on the view menu and go to clip view, I see that I have an animation called Siren waiting for me to edit. I'll click on that and I'll go back to view and I'll open up the editor itself. Now, don't get freaked out about the animation editor. I assure you it's not as intimidating as it looks. It's actually very straightforward to use. You click on the thing you want to animate, and basically we have a couple of preset options we can play with. I can choose between rough or smooth transitions between animations. I have a number of presets here to record the object's scale, size, location, whether I want the location and scale of mesh materials to be remembered. I can also lock my keyframes so that I can't overwrite them at a later date. So I'm going to start using this editor, and to do that I just hit this record button. So I'll record the default starting location of this light. You'll notice that right away when I do that I get these sliders showing up. I will move this keyframe editor to the 1 second mark, and perhaps at this point in time I want my light to maybe move over here, and if I'm happy with that I will record the location of the light. I'll now go to the 2 second mark, and perhaps now I want the light to go over there, and finally at the 3 second mark maybe this light will come right down over here and be very short and intense, and we'll have the light land on the robot itself, and I'll record it. So if I hit play, oops, I get this effect of this light flying all over my workspace. Now here I have a couple of additional presets that are worth noting. This option here will toggle the clip so that it plays in the simulator automatically. I would suggest that you click on that because we'll want to use our animation later on in our RobotSim project. A couple of other options here. Right now the default is just for this animation to execute over the course of 3 seconds and stop. We might want it to loop or ping pong, and we can take a look at the effect of some of these things. So if I click on loop and hit play, this animation just loops infinitely forever. I'll stop the animation. And what happens if we click on ping pong and I hit play? Well, now the animation goes all the way to the end and then goes backwards. You can see the effect of that. If I look here at my slider, it's going all the way to the 3 second mark and then all the way back. It's retracing its steps. That's ping pong. Clamp forever. Clamp forever basically will see this animation get executed all the way to the 3 second mark and then hold its end position. So if I hit play, we see that this animation, kind of similar to the loop effect, it goes from beginning to end. We'll notice it more dramatically in the simulator that the light will stay at the 3 second mark. I'm going to hit stop and I will click on loop. That sounds good to me. Again, if I hit play, notice that it loops. I may want to increase the clip speed. For example, I may want to make this animation twice as fast or 5 times as fast if I want to be really dramatic. And when I do that and hit play, now this light is flying all over the place. I can slow it down and bring it back to 1 second. And that looks a lot more natural. I can, again, to demonstrate the change in transitions, I might want a jagged transition. So if I hit play, You know, perhaps not so obvious at the 1 second mark, but what about at the 10-second mark? You know, now it's almost like point to point to point, almost like if we were at a rave. So I'll hit stop. I'll change my transition back to the default, and I'll set the clip speed back to its normal speed of 1. At this point, I'm pretty happy with what I've done, so I'm going to save my project. Go File, Save. And I'm, just so I can find this later, I'm going to actually save it again, but I'm going to give it a more descriptive name. I'll call this Test Animation. And the very last thing we have to do is we need to export our robot so that it's a project, it becomes a model that we can use in the simulator. And to do that, we will click on Project, Build Resource. It'll ask you to give your resource a name. I might call this Test Siren or Siren Demo. I was playing in here a little bit earlier. Browse to a project location. In this particular case, this looks totally okay, so I'll hit Choose and I'll hit Build. And that's that. Now, when I launch Robot Sim, I'm just going to find it here on my Start menu. And create a new project. And I'm just going to delete some of the earlier examples I was working through. Okay, so now that I've exported my model as a resource, I simply go to Project, Add, Copy of Existing Item, and I find that resource file I've just created, which in this particular case is sitting on my desktop somewhere. You might want to note that I think the default file type is a script. We're going to be looking for a resource file or a .rres extension. And here I have my sirendemo.rres. The last thing we'll want to do is set a location for it in our folder structure, and I figure the resources folder is as good a place as any to put it. So I'll click Add. I'll drag my plane out here into the simulator. And when I hit play, I now have this light. In a future video, we'll look through the process of working in the simulator, but it's important to know that you can do some pretty cool things with both the lighting and animator within robotBuilder.